I have the special pleasure of introducing Olenka. Olenka is founder of Magical Bridge Playground in Palo Alto, Magical Bridge Foundation, and former Silicon Valley leader. In 2008, Olenka spearheaded a volunteer team of experts, educators, parents, and people from the disabled community to design and develop the groundbreaking Magical Bridge Playground in Palo Alto. Once opened to the public in 2015, it became celebrated as the nation's most innovative, inclusive playground, and has since received various recognition, including an exhibit at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2019. Olenka has since emerged as a respected thought leader and advocate for the playground and design thinking, which reflects the needs of everybody in a community. And as co-inventor and patent holder of several playground components, she frequently lectures at Stanford University and is thrilled about how the foundation's work is extending and inspiring a much needed and truly magical multi-generational play. Olenka holds a BA in economics and public policy from Pomona College and an MBA in marketing from Golden Gate University. Thank you for joining us, Olenka.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dana.
Great. Well, before we jump in with questions, just a little bit on the format. It's question and answer, and I'll be asking the questions. And of course, Olenka will be answering, and then we'll take some time for your questions. Let's go ahead and get started. Olenka, I mean, what is exactly an inclusive design, and how did you become interested in this kind of work?
Well, in general, I like to start by saying inclusive design and inclusive anything is a term that I hope one day doesn't even exist, because I will assume that all of us, all of those joining tonight, everybody wants to be included. And what that means is we've come to expect that different groups need different things. And when it comes to the design of public spaces and places, where we gather as community, of course, it is even more important that places are designed with all of us in mind, the many different kinds of people that exist in communities today. And inclusive design really means that you're designing not only for the body you're in today, the body you're going to grow old in or change along the way. So that is really my definition of inclusive design thinking. And I really fell into this quite organically, as many people do when they take on a social impact in their life. Mine started, many years ago when my second daughter, Ava, who's now 20, was born. And I recognized that in my own community of Palo Alto, as I was struggling to determine what it is that Ava needed to thrive and to do the best in her life. She was born with what is still an unknown variety of disabilities, but movement, swinging, being outdoors was always something that was prescribed to her. And I stumbled across the opportunity that our public playgrounds could use a little refresher. And so that's how I came into this particular world of sort of reimagining what a public playground could be. And that brought me to the work I'm doing here at Magical Bridge. Is we reimagined what it might look like to have a public playground that was designed not only, of course, with a family like mine involved, which is one that has two children with different needs, but along the way we met a lot of different community members that were omitted from the design of something as vibrant as a community playground. So that's how I fell into this line of work, very organically.
Well, thank you. Doesn't the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 force playgrounds to be inclusive of people with disabilities?
Right. No, that's a super great point. So for those that are not as familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act, indeed, it was really valiantly fought for by people right here in the East Bay. Judy Heumann, who just passed away, fought very hard for all Americans to have access to public spaces and places in 1990. However, I do want to recognize that that was a great start, and what we need is to continue that hard work. And I'll ask Brittany to pop up the slide number 1, because it really shows the importance of really sort of going beyond what Americans with Disabilities Act is doing today. And that is that there's over 1 billion people worldwide that are living with a disability. Right. So 1 in every 4 people around the world have a disability, and it can be visible or it can be invisible. And so what the Americans with Disabilities Act does is that it really ensures that people using a wheelchair have access to these public spaces, which naturally is very critical. But what happens is most people with a disability are continued to be overlooked in the design. And in our case, we were focused on the playground. So when we started the work with Magical Bridge, what we realized is that the public playground was not being designed with these various unique needs that are found in our community members, right? So now it's 1 in 36 people have autism, right? They belong to the community and their families want to play. People with different sensory needs and so on, even our older adults. And if we go to the second sort of slide after this, not to go too deep into the weeds, but, here we were a group of volunteers sort of kind of coming up with what would it mean to have a playground for everyone. I mean, today's, compliant to law playgrounds are indeed not incorporating the needs of varying individuals. And this slide is now actually, as of I think 2 weeks ago, Jill Escher mentioned that the new statistic is 1 in 36. So people with autism, I mean, those on this call that know that children or adults with autism are very quick runners. And so most of our public parks today are not fenced in, and they often are next to a busy street. And so those kinds of parents and those adults rarely will find themselves in a public playground. Our teens, I mean, what we tend to do is think about playgrounds as things for younger children. But in fact, there are many people whose physical age and cognitive age don't match, right? So my daughter Ava is one of those people. She's 20 on the outside, but she's, no more than a 1 or 2 year old in the kinds of things that she's interested in and the way she presents. So we found these kinds of things to be interesting in the sense that we recognized early on our group that there was so much more that we could do. And then on top of that, what makes a playground or a public space welcoming to everyone are the companion programs that you can add to them. So these are sort of the highlight of what we consider to be the many ways that we can do better in the design of a public playground. And so that's part of the research that went into creating the first Magical Bridge.
Well, very nice. Just a quick question. I would have thought that perimeter fencing keeps people out, but you're saying you need perimeter fencing to keep people in?
Yes, good point. Well, essentially a fence, if created thoughtfully and around a space that you want to enter with your family, knowing that you can sit down and comfortably enjoy time there, not worried that, someone's going to run off into the street, certainly puts people's mind at ease in many different ways. In fact, I'll digress for a moment and say when we started this adventure, there was a call from a Parks and Rec department out in the middle of the country, and they called to say, we recognized that we were doing something wrong when we had over 50 public parks And we had a group of parents who have children with autism came to us, and they said the only place they take their kids is to the dog park because it is the only place that's fenced in. And so there are these aha moments that we find people have once you bring to their attention why people need the extra supports or the extra thoughtful design. And then once you're aware of it, it's difficult to go back to the older way of thinking because you recognize very, very many families do benefit from somebody being considered in a thoughtful design.
Are there other examples of things that existing parks, do or don't do that exclude people?
Well, I will say it's usually inadvertent, right? So in order to get public playgrounds installed in both our cities, our communities, our school playgrounds, they do come forward with this compliancy of being compliant to ADA law. However, being compliant and being, welcoming of everyone are two different things. I mean, when we talk to the kids, younger kids in different elementary settings, we have three basic points we like to make, and they rhyme, so it keeps it easy. What really makes a playground a little magical for people is there a way to get in, to move around the playground easier, right? So is there a way? Will you be able to play? Can you find what you need, no matter what your size, your ability, your age, right? And the final one is, will you stay? So is there a way? Can you play? Will you stay? Is there a place for you to sit comfortably? Is there shade? Is there seating? Are you able to just interact with your family and also sit back and relax? So all of these components, when you start to look at it with that lens and you go to public playgrounds today, you recognize those wood chips that are really legally ADA compliant. You can't even get a wheelchair across many of those, right? Most of the equipment that you'll find in a public playground is for younger children. It is limited based on ages. When we know from experience and from a lot of research that those with autism benefit from the swinging into their senior years. So why are we limiting playgrounds to young children when we really want to open the possibilities of multi-generational play, even for what I call adults like you and I, Dana? You probably are too young to be thinking about growing too much older, but the reality is, swinging wards off signs of Alzheimer's. So there's a lot of great benefits to movement, and we believe that everyone should have a welcoming experience in an outdoor public space.
So in what ways have you seen in your inclusive outdoor spaces bring people together?
Well, gosh, where do we begin? So Palo Alto's Magical Bridge did start, organically, and we opened it in 2015. And that was the beginning of an adventure of communities around really the nation and even the world reaching out to say, well, we'd like something like this. We don't have something like that. And so as such, Magical Bridge started really with a bang. We have in each Magical Bridge design, we have a community gathering space, a stage, treehouse, playhouse, which encourages community gathering. We sort of have found the Magical Bridge is serving the community like the Newtown Square that we so desperately need, a place where people can get together. We have found that typically our playgrounds are enjoying upwards of 20,000 guests a month, and these people do come to play, but they come to connect, they come to listen to music. It's a meeting place. It's a place, it's sort of the last democratic institution where no matter what your religious background or your economic or your political views, you will come to the same community destination playground to connect with people and find ways that you're more similar sometimes than you are different. And I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, but I see as one of the attendees I have Professor Kaya Chu, who's calling in from Taipei, and she's a professor there who has come to Magical Bridge, and it sort of shows the global language that we all have, which is the need to belong, to have a place where we're welcome with our whole family. And so individuals like her always warm my heart when we find like-minded people around the globe that are trying to accomplish the same thing, a place where everyone feels that they belong and they're welcome, no matter what their abilities or disabilities.
Are there some, less obvious ways inclusive playgrounds impact and influence society?
Well, some less obvious ways are perhaps in the fact that, most school communities spend a great deal of time and effort in anti-bullying campaigns and setting up these empathy experiences. And my favorite is Kindness Day or Kindness Week. I always think, well, what happens the rest of the year? It's great to be kind for a day or two, but if you're in a supportive environment where it is an organic experience. And so we now have seen with Palo Alto's Magical Bridge being open 7 years, I am meeting kids that are now older and they grew up with Magical Bridge in their life. And we have found the bullying is changing, right? So why do people bully one another sometimes in middle school? Well, because they're sometimes uncomfortable. They're seeing a behavior they haven't seen before. And so they bully because they're just not sure what to do. If you grow up with people of different abilities, and you will see somebody on the playground and later see them in your middle school, you may not be their best friend, but you're probably not going to bully them because you've seen them. They belong in your community. You know their family. You've seen their family. I think the challenge in general is when these families are so isolated from everyone else, and then they resurface in some setting, whether it's in a school or a store, and then people have not been exposed to the different members of our communities that are hiding sometimes in the shadows. That is where, behavior happens that we don't feel is very magical. So the benefits have been incredible in the sense there's a ripple effect. So where Magical Bridge has placed their designed spaces, playgrounds, we are finding a light bulb goes on, right? So the city council recognizes, oh, well, we thought we were doing right by these playgrounds, but now we know we're missing some people that need to be included. Programs start to change. In Palo Alto, we are thrilled that there's this magical series of programs that are now being offered for guests of one age, but developmental differences. So for instance, you may see a class in Palo Alto which says this is for teens that are developmentally between 8 and 10. And so the awareness about the honoring of people for who they are starts to become more prevalent. So we're just, thrilled about that, and certainly wish the world worked this way everywhere.
Olenka, what have you found to be the most challenging part in creating these playgrounds?
Well, I think when we started, and even to some degree today, the word inclusive, the word accessible is really used predominantly in much of the designs that we see, and people get excited about saying they're designing inclusive playgrounds, inclusive spaces. The industry, the playground industry also is very proud that they have all these inclusive designs, but they aren't as inclusive as they should be. And so our challenge has really been in the messaging about why what we're doing is different and why inclusive and accessible really needs to bring a little higher elevation to the focus of what that means. And so we are constantly trying to sort of help elevate the messaging that inclusive ideally should mean everyone. We may not get it right 100%, but boy, it sure is better to try than not to try at all. I think there is some hesitation because the law doesn't say you need to do it, but we're doing it we sort of feel like we're doing it for the right reasons and showing by example that when you create a space for everyone, you do see everyone come out, and it ignites the local, businesses and the communities. And So the answer to the question was really in the messaging, in the explanation that people of all abilities and ages benefit from movement, and that our playgrounds should be designed beyond just the typical, we call cheap and cheerful. There's a lot of benefit to creating a community gathering space where everyone comes together.
And do you think we're headed in a direction where we'll see a future where we'll have more inclusive design? And if not, what do you think it'll take to get there?
Well, I do think again, it sort of depends where you live in this world, but there are pockets of the world where, of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, that's become a very important part of corporate culture and communities. And we love to see that. We also keep sort of raising our hands like, well, but also don't forget, the group that also has varying abilities and disabilities. So I think the awareness is rising. I think people with disabilities are coming forward at long last. I mean, between their the marketing power that they have, the power of the wallet, people with disabilities are now able to express themselves. I think that these technologies that are now available have sort of elevated a lot of people that used to not be able to participate in the world, and now with the technology can do so perhaps in a more appropriate way for them, right? So they can work from home. And so there's a big movement right now. I think that people with disabilities are making that happen. I think the parts of the world are receptive. I think that because every fourth person has a varying disability, it's not an us and them anymore. Most of us have a family member that benefits from this kind of thoughtfulness. And so I think that there's this, and also the last thing I would say is there's a silver tsunami that we are in the middle of, which is the graying of America. And so those are the individuals that also may have a different physical or developmental need ahead. And so all of these factors together, I think, are moving us forward. The needle is moving forward, but it will take some time. And that's why we think the playground, even though we'd love to redesign the world to be more thoughtful for everyone, but the playground is the first outdoor classroom. It's the first place where you have the ability to impact young minds that are part of a community. And so we believe it begins there, and then it continues through school and so on. So I'm hopeful. I think it's we're getting there.
What other spaces really could benefit from this inclusive thought process, this inclusive design?
Well, of course, I would say every space should have an inclusive design. I go back to that original comment. Don't we all want to be included? Isn't it interesting that we'll go shopping to a Whole Foods or a grocery store or Nordstrom? We don't go to an inclusive Nordstrom, an inclusive Whole Foods. We just go to Whole Foods. So I think that designers should be thoughtful and consider the needs. I mean, even I remember I had a conversation with somebody from corporate that came out from Starbucks, and they wanted to know, well, how can we design our spaces to be more inclusive of everyone, right? And a lot of it is just recognizing, well, maybe you could invite somebody with autism to be a barista, but maybe that person, in order to do good work, will need some noise canceling headphones. And maybe there's a need for different level counters, or maybe there's, tactile information that can be available. So going down the list of as much as you can do is better than doing nothing, and then continuing to check in with your community on what you can do to be better. And because there is no mandate right now, the best we can do is just to continue to go back to that grassroots research. And there's no shortage of people that will share what they need to make their community more meaningful and accessible to them. And what we're doing with our little foundation at Magical Bridge is we are trying to select projects that provide that example of what happens when you do create for everyone and the new friendships that come from it. And just the sense of relief that families have that there is a place they can go with their 30-year-old in swing or 5-year-old to teach them empathy without putting them into a classroom. So I think there's a lot of potential for better design everywhere, really.
Well, that's fantastic. One other one, you mentioned programming.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about programming and how that makes, this whole thing really work.
Yeah, so the physical space is great and it needs to be there. But with that comes the bonus of having reasons for people to come together, right? So we have, with each of the spaces, we always have a kindness ambassador program, which are in some cases teens that model kind behavior and do activities, and we have concerts. And in other times, it's the older community members that have retired and want to do something in their community that's meaningful. Every city that we work with puts a bit of their own spin on it, but nonetheless, it is something that we sort of mandate when you do a project with us. And then with that comes this sort of organic explosion of groups that want to be part of something like this. I mean, it is that last frontier where it's sort of like the multi-purpose room of life. Everybody's welcome. You come as you are, you bring whatever interests you have. And the only rules really that apply is that when you do create something at a magical bridge, it does need to be welcoming for everyone and thoughtfully created. But the programming is just one of the most wonderful kind of side benefits of a magical bridge space. It is a very important component of our work.
Well, thank you. I think that wraps up our formal,
Thank you.
session. Back to you, Desiree.
Thank you, Olenka and Dana, for that amazing discussion. I think we've all learned so much from your insights. We can go ahead and get started with the Q&A session. So if you have any questions and you haven't done so already, please type in your question into the Q&A feature. That's right there on the control panel at the bottom of your screen. And we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a question already. Let's see. This question is asking, what exactly is an inclusive design and how did you become interested in this kind of work?
Well, I think that was answered. I don't know if you want me to do that one again, or what do you think, Dana? Do you feel like we should do the inclusive design question? I don't want to keep everyone.
I think you did address it, but maybe just to sum it up, because I think it is fascinating.
Well, inclusive means everyone. I just think that it's a buzzword, but it needs to be more than just what's legally mandated, but it needs to include the whole family, multi-generational, everyone. And I got into it because of my own daughter, Ava, who is now 20. She is probably developmentally very similar to when I started Magical Bridge when she was about 5 or 6. So she is a reminder that there are people that have different needs and live among us, and families like to go together places. And if you create a design that's inclusive of the whole family, not only is it a much more magical experience, but it's also more lucrative for whichever business you happen to be running that's thoughtful about your family's needs.
Okay, great. And we have another question here. And Olenka, this is for you as well. This audience member is asking, where are all the Magical Bridge playgrounds located?
Oh, well, we actually, you don't mind, Brittany, popping up 5, my 5th, I had a slide, there we go. So since we started about 7 years ago, we've got these playgrounds operational. So the 7th being Palo Alto, 6. So we have the Mitchell Park, and here Red Morton is Redwood City, Addison, the school playgrounds, we're redoing the Palo Alto schools. And there's Curiosity, Fair Oaks Community Park. And if you want to pop the next one up, just to give a feel for the types of projects that we have coming, some internationally, including some larger spaces that have evolved. So not only the playgrounds, but we've been invited to reimagine some larger park spaces to really create sort of a park plaza, again, with the lens of true, inclusive, thoughtful design for everyone. So please stay connected with us. And the next groundbreaking we have is the Santa Clara Playground, which is underway right now. Thank you for the questions.
Awesome. All right, we have another great one here. In an aging society, what are the benefits of promoting inclusive playgrounds? By this, I mean, are there any possible collaboration strategies?
Well, that's a great question. And absolutely, yes. So there's been a tremendous amount of press recently about loneliness in our aging population, a sense of wanting to belong and to be more involved. And so we do address that in the programming and the Kindness Ambassador program, and we have Movement for Seniors and so on. We think it's really magical when we can create multi-generational connections. You know, many people, especially in the California area, have family members that don't live here, so don't have maybe the grandparents at the ready. So having the dialogue, partnering our ambassadors together with young and older adults is wonderful. But beyond that is just that it is a place that on any given, summer evening when we have concerts, you do see all ages interacting and dancing and just having a good time. So I, am excited that we can move these playgrounds into more of a multi-generational variety, and have even been approached by some groups to create an adult-only playground, but we haven't quite, all of our equipment is open to all of us. So essentially, if we went on a magical bridge, we'd be able to play on every single piece of equipment. I don't know if that answered the question, but thank you.
Great. Okay. And I have another question here. And this looks like it's for you, Dana and Olenka both. Can you go over what the accessibility features look like at the playground more specifically? And also, what does accessibility look like at an LSA home?
You want to take that on first, or shall I start?
Sure, I'll go ahead and at an LSA home, we think that, inclusive looks like having, access. And so, it kind of begins with creating, ways for people to get in and out and around in an LSA home that makes it easy for them. We also think of having open spaces and trying to configure them in a way that encourages people to gather and not isolate themselves. So making things accessible, encouraging people to have spaces where they can, again, connect and get together, much the same as Olenka explained as the purpose of having a gathering space.
Yeah. And as far, this is probably a little bit more into the weeds conversation, but, with the Magical Bridge, what we found through our research, and we continue to research continuously to make each playground more welcoming, more accessible. But, when you think of a public playground, many of you might think of those structures that are literally in the rubber and the ground. And those are very, very kind of easy to put in, but they omit a lot of things. So for us, what we found is the accessibility includes the layout. So each magical bridge is divided up into zones that reflect sort of the developmental milestones that each of us, regardless of our, the speed of moving through different milestones, we each need to do that. There's feedback that we need to our brains and to our bodies to develop the muscle and the coordination. And there are sensory seekers, people that need that feedback. And then there are sensory avoiders, people that need to get away from the noise. And so when we think about the layout, the colors, the sensory elements, the shade, I mean, there's so many things that go into sort of a magical bridge. And we also advance technology and music innovations, right? Because many people in our world, which I say our world being people that have varying disabilities, rely on the technology. So we also have an innovation and music zone in each magical bridge. So the question of what makes the accessibility important to us really is multifaceted, because it's not just physical and it's a balance, right? So what do you do that is appropriate for one group but is not off-putting to another group? And so that is the secret of, I guess, trying to get it right. And we were surprised along the way that there are many things that are not thought through. Like, for instance, signs. This is a small example, but in Redwood City, we did these new kinds of tactile signs that are for low vision and blind guests. And we were looking for, what is the industry standard? Do you put a QR code? Do you do Braille? And so it's amazing that there isn't a lot of sort of consistency yet. And that's because it hasn't been legally mandated. And so we show by example what's possible, but it isn't, always 100%. We continue to evolve. So we are a bit of a work in progress, and also a learning lab all at the same time. In fact, we have Foothill Community College is creating Magical Bridge in a learning lab. So stay tuned, and there'll be more coming soon about all that.
Yeah, we have a great transition to that. And this audience member is saying, Olenka, thank you for this wonderful talk tonight. How do you collaborate with designers or university students for creative ideas?
Well, I just took a peek. I see that's coming from Professor Chu from Taipei. And we do a lot of good work with Stanford in particular, because they're local, and we participate in some engineering classes and design classes. And we love working with students, with university students, because it does open up their minds, we think, no matter what they do in their life, to let them know that there is a need to consider everyone in their design, whether it's a playground or a product or a program. There's a lot of people that benefit from all of that. And so we wish we had more hours in the day, because that is what really fills my heart with tremendous joy, is to be able to work with young people and students, and we'd like to have time to do more of that.
Hey, Olenka, before I forget,
Yes.
what can people do to help Magical Bridge and help this, process along? It seems such a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you for the question. I would say if you had asked me this maybe a year ago, I'd have some sort of a project that we needed to still raise funds for. But at the moment, I'm delighted to say that we are now in a world where we have sort of moved away from showing by example what a magical bridge is. And now those projects that we're selecting are coming to us with the funds. But and I will also do a small plug for the fact that I am a very proud board member of LSA now for 12 years. And so we all do what we do. I mean, LSA creates the most magical homes and the most welcoming programming and home environments for our older adults with disabilities. We've taken on the playground. I mean, I invite everybody to do something. It doesn't have to be monumental, but it can be as simple as going to your city and saying, we'd like to see more thoughtful programming in our city. We'd like to have program that considers adults that might not have something at the moment to do, or certainly we're happy to talk to cities that are interested in bringing a magical bridge. That's always by example. showing that there are many people that enjoy this type of community outdoor space. Come and volunteer with us if you're looking for something fun to do. It's a pretty fun group, and you can pick a city that appeals to you. If you're musically talented and you want to join us for our summer concert series, you can get a hold of me. But, you know, mostly we just would love to see you on the playgrounds. We appreciate the warm words, and just thinking about thoughtful consideration of everyone is really where our mission lies.
Great. And speaking of mission, we have a question asking both you, Olenka and Dana, what's been the most difficult part of carrying out the mission of Magical Bridge and or LSA Homes?
Well, I mean, just quickly, for us, probably the most difficult, well, honestly, the most difficult part for me has been the interest that we receive that we can't get to. So candidly, we do get approached by far more groups than we can take on. And so we are moving now in the direction with some very wonderful board members of our own and our team to create sort of a different way to expand Magical Bridge's work in the world without the heavy sort of lift from our foundation, if you will, because we do feel that we can do more. So we've been limited essentially by our ability to get to the communities that we would like to, really.
So for me, for LSA, I think it's the fact that the demand, for LSA homes, outstrips the supply. We've worked very hard, thanks to community support, to add LSA homes over time. Our goal is to add one a year, but that's not keeping up with the need.
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly frustrates me, but we just keep our head down and keep working as hard as we can towards that goal of adding homes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Olenka, we have another question for you. This audience member is asking, there are some people that exclude children with invisible disabilities at normal playgrounds because they do not understand the concept of what an invisible disability looks like or is. How would you improve the situation or promote the concept? I'm assuming of inclusiveness for the public.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is really at the core of what Magical Bridge does, right? So if you include everyone in your space, everyone feels like it has been designed with them in mind. I mean, many times I'll talk to students and I say, I now have a visible disability. Right now, it's an invisible, right? So I'm wearing contact lenses. You don't know that I don't see anything. But when I, put my glasses, oh, you don't see anything, right? So these are messages that we have expected, which is if you have something that's clearly different about you, it must mean that you have a certain disability. And that's not always right either. So I think what we try to do with our spaces is shift the narrative that, many people are in need of, different supports for their enjoyment of outdoor time, which translates really to every probably part of their life, but we can only do at the moment, the playgrounds. With Magical Bridge comes that awareness, right? Every time we do a Magical Bridge project, it really goes through the community and the awareness increases so that in that community, in the schools, there is a heightened sense of acceptance. So, but we also rely on families and, everyone to be part of that mission whenever possible. It's probably a more complicated situation, but yeah, the world needs to sort of become more aware that disabilities are also invisible, and need to have the same level of consideration, of course.
All right. And we have another one here. Olenka, you kind of been answering this throughout the webinar. But this question could also be for you, Dana. How influential is LSA and Magical Bridge in creating a more inclusive society?
Well, I guess I wish we were a lot more influential than we are, but we try our best to be good advocates, to practice what we preach. You know, and one of my proudest moments was partnering with Magical Bridge and working, you know, with our residents to create art that could become part forever of one of the Magical Bridge parks.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, looking for projects and, you know, actively pursuing getting people out into the community and being visible but you know, it's not easy. And you know, the job never finishes. So yes, I think we try very hard to make it, you know, part of our fabric and part of what we do every day in our mission, which is to, you know, provide you know, homes for these individuals that will allow them to live their best possible life. And we believe that certainly is a inclusive life.
Yes, I mean, I think I would agree with and everything. Of course, I've had the privilege and pleasure to be part of this board for so many years and have seen the transformative work that LSA has done. I mean, it's really the gold standard, and I know how many families long for that type of peace of mind for their own loved ones. So if I really could use my magic wand and sort of make LSA appear everywhere, and Magical Bridge, you know, Magical Bridge doesn't need to be on every corner, but certainly in each community, to be able to have a place where you could go and you don't have to drive for 3 hours to come with your family to a public playground. I mean, life is already quite challenging when you have somebody with a disability that you're caring for. And so just to take that joy of being part of your public playground away, or not even offer that, you know, you see 50 public parks around your community and you realize not a single one of these is right for my family, right? So the message needs to be that, you know, sure, not every park has to be exactly inclusive, but certainly there need to be more of them because there are a lot of families that benefit from thoughtful design. And as I was starting Magical Bridge, I'd say 90% of the people that helped me were families that did not have anyone in their immediate family with a disability, but they said to me, you know, I want my kids to play with your kids, and I want my kid to get to know Ava and understand that she's part of the community. So I think a lot of organic lessons evolve from places like LSA in the community and Magical Bridge in the community.
Great. All right, I think we have time for one more question. We have a audience member asking, Olenka, this is for you. What advice would you give to someone or a group looking to support or create a park like Magical Bridge?
Okay, well, I had 2 calls like that today. There is a lot of advice. And so I'm going to say, because we are limited on time, is I'm happy to talk to anybody about bringing one of these playgrounds into their own communities. But it usually starts with the awareness and the need for a place like this. And typically then you do an outreach either to the city council, the city manager. And I will tell you for a fact that each of the Magical Bridge projects that we have done and continue to do are very, very popular with local elected officials. They really love to put their name on a project like this. So the first step is to go to your local, Parks and Rec director, city management, and find the champion that gets it. Yes, you need one of these in your community. And once you get some traction, sometimes we have a group coming out. The whole group from Denver is coming out to visit next month. They've never seen a magical bridge, but they're going to be putting one in. So lots of things, show and tell is always great. Seeing it is the best way to experience it. But if anybody on this session would like to reach out for more, I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, how would they get a hold of you, Olenka?
Well, I'm very easy to get a hold of. All my numbers are posted on all kinds of, to my husband's chagrin. Yes, just if you either find me through Magical Bridge, if you Google Magical Bridge, my name, you can find me fairly easily. And I welcome your calls.
Great. Thank you both so much. That was the end of the Q&A session. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all of the questions this evening, but there were a lot of great questions and a lot of great answers. Thank you again. We are wrapping up the evening. And everyone, you can find Olenka's contact again here on the screen, and there should be links in the chat as well. So please check that out.
Mm-hmm. And I see there are a few questions we didn't get to. So really, I just want to thank the interested individuals I really do. I would be happy to talk to you or answer any questions offline.
Yeah, please check out the chat again, everyone. Olenka's links should be there. Olenka, Dana, it's been such a pleasure having you tonight. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for our final IDD topics and trends. Such an amazing way to end it. Thank you to everyone who helped put this series together. Thank you again, Olenka, and all the incredible speakers that joined us for the series. Again, you can find the recording and the transcript for this webinar on our website sometime later this week. So please be sure to check that out. As always, everyone also keep in touch. Please visit our website, check out our social media, contact us through email. And just one last announcement before you hop out. We have our 4th annual Home is Where the Heart Is fundraising event taking place on May 20th. That will be a Saturday. You definitely do not want to miss this live entertainment and the speakers. We will have James Durbin from American Idol, super exciting, and comedian Regina Stoops. You can register for this free event using the link in the chat, or you can also check out our website, lsahomes.org, for all that good stuff, information and whatnot. Till next time, thank you everyone again for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you so much.